So we got this car here back from the paint shop, so we're going to be putting a bunch of pieces back on that we had to take off so that they could buff and paint and whatnot. So right now what we've done is we've cleaned off the glass. Unfortunately the previous owner had gone through a bunch of these auto wash and wax places, so it left a nasty film around a lot of places. I've got everything I can off the glass without tearing it up. It looks like it etched it a little bit. But I am going to be putting the trim back on now that I've got it clean, as well as the surface here is as clean as I can get it. So this process requires little retainers ever so often around the windshield. Hopefully you can kind of see where I'm pointing here. We'll get some closer shots here for you soon. But each one of these retains the trim piece down, so you have to be real careful though pushing this down, as well as or especially when you take it off, because if you pry too hard, of course you'll scratch or dent your car, or possibly even crack the glass if you are working from the glass side. So be sure and use plastic bone tools and proper tools for popping this kind of stuff off, and don't get too aggressive or try to rush it. Take your time, do this slowly so you don't damage anything. I'm going to lower this piece of trim down without tearing up the car. Like I said, be real gentle when you're doing this. Kind of get it in a general location over where it's going to snap down. And then you're just going to have to work your way around getting it in its proper positions. So that's about a quarter of it around. So like I said, do be very careful as you're doing this. You don't want to be pushing too hard over the glass, because you can crack that little edge that does hang over the glue. So as you see here, just going to be real gentle going around the rest of it, putting it all back on. So here we are. The component is actually back on place, just like it should be. Like I said, there are several clips around this. I apologize, I did not count how many, but they will require a decent amount of pressure to get them go down. Worked my way from the top center all the way down. You see back here, it's actually got like a rubber flap that will help keep the water from rolling down heavily into the trunk area. This little piece of rubber here that creates a seal against the windshield, that there you have to be real careful as you're pushing down, because you don't want to pop it off of this gray piece here that is actually metal. And the same thing goes for this rubber on the opposite side. So as you're pushing down, be sure not to pop that loose from the metal part of the trim. So etching came in a little bit handy to me, because it helped me kind of line up my edges, so I knew exactly where this thing would line up on the windshield as I was pushing it down. So we'll go ahead and check our trunk here. Trunk lines up just like it should, as you can see there. It's hitting the rubber seal. It's also hitting over here on this rubber seal. So when the trunk is closed, you'll actually create a contact across this entire back section and help keep water from filling the trunk runways too heavily. So I'm about to reinstall the front trim around the front windshield. You can see, I'm going to try to get in closer here. We have these pieces of plastic here that are actually the clip retainers for the piece of trim. It actually has like a piece of metal that snaps down into that, and that's what holds the trim in place. Now this piece of trim is actually a C shape, so it goes up one side, across the top, and down the other side. That's all it covers. There's a whole other piece of plastic that goes across the bottom of the windshield, as well as covers the wiper motors and defroster inlets and that kind of stuff. So we're going to rest this on the car gently, right over how it's going to lay. Like I said, it just kind of makes a C shape right over the top of the windshield and down the sides. So this is a little different than the rear. As I showed you earlier, it has these plastic retainers. The rear actually has metal retainers, so they're not quite as easy to break. These here are much easier to break, so you want to be extremely careful pushing these back on. So you don't want to damage your trim, and you really don't want to damage those clips either, because to replace those clips, it requires to cut them out of the glue that holds the windshield in. So you would have to actually kind of reseal, or would have to reseal your windshield back onto the car. Right now I'm just lining it up onto the clips. And when I push it down, it snaps right in. Let me give it a little tap. Said be patient, go slowly. Make sure you're lining up properly so you don't break a clip off. If you're fortunate enough to find a set of these that aren't rusted in some form or fashion, consider yourself very lucky. That apparently was a big problem for these pieces of trim that went around the windshield. Fortunately, mine aren't too bad, so hopefully they'll last a little while longer, but if it gets too bad, of course I'll have to take them back off and get them painted. And there we are. Now our windshield trim piece is back on. Just like the rear section, you want to make sure you don't pop these little rubber sections that are on each side of the metal section off while you're popping it back onto the clips. I do not recommend using any kind of hammer, even a rubber hammer. Use your hands. If you've got to give it a little bop, use the soft part of your hand to give it a little bop. But be very, very cautious of of being rough with this at all. These are some pretty thin metal, so it doesn't take much to bend or break them. So just like the rear, it does have a seam right in the center. So when you're taking this apart, it does not pull apart because the rubber is not seamed here at the top. So if you go to pull this apart in sections, you'll wind up damaging your rubber seal at the top. So be sure and take the whole thing off and put the whole thing back on as one piece. You can, like I said, take that off if you need to send them in for paint, but they will have to be re-glued when you get them back, because that rubber will of course have to come off when you send them in for paint. Much more tedious process if you have to do that, but it is able to be done. Just a few close-ups after the trim has been put back on. As you can see, you got the gray part in the middle, and there's rubber on either side to help seal the windshield in, keep down on wind noise. See if we can get in here. There's that seam I'm talking about. You can see where the split in the metal and the split in the lower rubber seal is, but there is no split on the top rubber seal. So do take this off as one piece.